Reaction is pouring in after the Centers for Disease Control said the U.S. fertility rate is at an all-time low. The CDC says the new fertility rate is 1.6 children per woman. In the 1960s, during the so-called baby boom, the U.S. total fertility rate was around 3.5. A researcher at the University of Colorado Boulder says there's no reason to be concerned. She tells the Associated Press, quote, we're seen as part of an ongoing process of fertility delay. We know that the U.S. population is still growing and we still have a natural increase, more births than deaths. But is she right? For more, we turn to Brad Wilcox, a professor at the University of Virginia and a fellow at the American Institute for Family Studies. Brad, great to have you back. First off, what do you make of the CDC numbers, and are you concerned?
Yeah, it's troubling that we're actually hitting a record low here when it comes to fertility in America. Just 1.6 babies per woman now are being born on average in the U.S. And that means that absent immigration, the U.S. population would be shrinking. And even with immigration, we're seeing right now a majority of counties across the U.S. are shrinking because in part of this lower fertility rate that we've just heard about.
Put these numbers in context for us. Are we really at half the fertility rate as the 1960s?
Yeah, we're almost there, and we are below the replacement rate, which is 2.1 babies per woman on average. So this is a pretty marked decline that we've been seeing unfolding here in the United States, and it's partly a consequence of the fact that we're also seeing in recent decades a decline in marriage, which is one of the most important drivers of declining fertility here in the U.S.
So how does the U.S. birth rate compare with the rest of the world?
So we're still better off than much of Europe. But what I think is concerning is that we're actually seeing fertility falling in most developed countries across the globe. And so it seems like U.S. is kind of joining that broader pattern where for a variety of reasons, people are not, getting married and they're not having kids in the same numbers that they were, a generation or two ago.
Well, the answer might seem straightforward, but how can we reverse this trend?
I think three things are really important. One is kind of making marriage both more attractive and more attainable. I think another thing we need to do is to look at bringing down the cost of housing, especially for first-time home buyers. And then a third thing that we need to do is to really make having kids more attractive. A lot of Americans think today that kind of becoming a parent is a pathway to misery. What we see in the data, though, is that there are no group of Americans who are happier than married dads and married moms. I think we need to do a better job of kind of communicating to the broader public how much becoming a parent is a pathway not to misery, but to a life of greater meaning, purpose, and generally happiness.
Well, Brad Wilcox, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.